What if the man who craved the world's attention more than anyone, the man who plastered his name in gold on the tallest towers, was forever chasing the approval of a single, unmovable force, the ghost of his own father? Welcome, story seekers, to Star's Tale, the place where we journey beyond the headlines and into the heart of the stories that define our icons. Tonight, we dim the lights and open the book on a life that has been a tempest, a spectacle, and an American epic unlike any other. We invite you to listen closely, not to the noise of politics, but to the whispers of a life lived at maximum volume, as we unravel the story of Donald John Trump. He was born not into a world of gold, but of brick and mortar, a child of Queens, a borough away and a universe apart from the glittering island of Manhattan that would one day become his kingdom and his Colosseum. The date was June 14, 1946, and the world was rebuilding itself from the ashes of war, but in the Trump household, the world was being built, one sturdy, no-frills building at a time. His father, Fred Trump, was a titan of the outer boroughs, a man whose hands were calloused by ambition and whose heart beat in time with the metronome of profit and loss. Fred was a legend in his own right, a relentless developer who conjured housing for the middle class from the soil of Brooklyn and Queens. He was a man of discipline, of pragmatism, a man who saw sentiment as a weakness and emotion as an expense. And into this world of stark lines and calculated risks came Donald, his fourth child, a boy crackling with an energy that could not be contained within the neat confines of his father's world. From the very beginning, he was different. While his siblings might have found their place within the family structure, Donald was a current of chaos, a bundle of untamed ambition that his father both recognized and sought to forge into something useful. Fred's philosophy was simple, brutal, and seared into the psyche of his favorite son: the world is a dangerous place, and in it, you are either a killer or you are killed. There was no middle ground, no room for graceful losers. You win. That's it. This was the first and most important commandment in the gospel according to Fred Trump. Young Donald was a handful, a boy who reportedly threw erasers at teachers and pulled girls' hair, not out of malice, but out of a desperate, primal need to be the center of every room, to be seen, to be acknowledged. He was testing the boundaries of his world, pushing against the walls to see which ones would give. His energy was a problem his parents didn't know how to solve until, at the age of 13, they made a decision that would become a cornerstone of his personal mythology. They sent him away. Not to a gentle boarding school, but to the New York Military Academy, a place of cold bugle calls at dawn, of polished brass and spitshine shoes, a crucible designed to melt down unruly boys and recast them as men of discipline. For many, this would have been a prison. For Donald, it became a revelation. Here, his chaotic energy had a purpose. The aggression that got him into trouble in a classroom was an asset on the athletic field. The desire to dominate was rewarded with stripes on his sleeve. He learned the language of hierarchy, of command, of respect earned through strength, not sentiment. He thrived, rising through the ranks to become a captain, leading his fellow cadets. It was here, on the marching grounds of upstate New York, that the boy from Queens learned to channel his inner tempest. He learned that being a killer wasn't just about instinct, it was about strategy, about presentation, about embodying the very idea of a leader. He was no longer just the loud kid, he was a commander. Yet, even as he excelled, the shadow of his father loomed large. He would return home on breaks, a decorated cadet, only to find himself once again the apprentice, sitting at the feet of the master builder. He would trail Fred on his rounds, watching him collect rents, inspect properties, and negotiate with the hardened contractors of New York City. He saw his father's genius, but also his limitations. Fred Trump was the king of the outer boroughs, but he was afraid of Manhattan. He saw it as a place of too much risk, too much glamour, a place where he didn't have the connections or the stomach for the high-stakes game. And in his father's fear, Donald saw his opening. It was the call of the void, the siren song of the island across the river. He attended Fordham University for 2 years before transferring to the Wharton School of Finance at the University of Pennsylvania, a move that was as much about acquiring a credential as it was about branding himself. Wharton. The name itself was a tool, a piece of armor, a signal that he was not just his father's son, but a new kind of animal, trained in the sophisticated arts of finance. After graduating in 1968, he officially joined his father's company, Elizabeth Trump & Son. But his heart wasn't in Queens. His gaze was fixed across the East River, on that skyline of jagged ambition, a place where fortunes were made and lost in the blink of an eye, a place where a name could become a legend. New York City in the 1970s was a city on its knees. It was a grimy, dangerous, bankrupt metropolis, a place many were fleeing. But where others saw decay, Donald Trump saw a fire sale. He saw a canvas. His first major move was a testament to his audacity. He set his sights on the derelict Commodore Hotel, a faded relic next to Grand Central Terminal. His father told him he was crazy. The banks wouldn't touch it. The city was a mess. But Donald saw the nexus, the location, the potential. He didn't just want to renovate a hotel, he wanted to make a statement. He assembled a complex, almost dizzying deal, a masterpiece of financial engineering and political maneuvering. He charmed politicians, secured an unprecedented 40-year tax abatement from the city, and persuaded Hyatt to come on as a partner. It was a gamble of epic proportions, a bet on a city that had bet against itself. And in 1980, the Grand Hyatt New York opened, a gleaming tower of reflective glass where a grimy fossil had once stood. It was a symbol of the city's rebirth, and more importantly, it was the birth of the Trump brand in Manhattan. He had done what his father wouldn't dare. He hadn't just crossed the river, he had conquered a piece of its most valuable real estate. The success of the Hyatt deal was like a drug. It fueled an even greater ambition, a desire to build something that wasn't just profitable, but iconic. Something that would bear his name for all to see. He found his next canvas on Fifth Avenue, the most prestigious retail street in the world, at the former site of the Bonwit Teller Building. This project would become the monument he had always dreamed of, the physical embodiment of his ego and his vision, Trump Tower. From the start, it was a project steeped in controversy and spectacle. To make way for his new building, he had to demolish the old one, including 2 Art Deco sculptures that the Metropolitan Museum of Art had asked to preserve. Trump initially agreed, but then, citing costs and delays, his crews destroyed them. The backlash from the city's cultural elite was swift and furious. They saw him as a barbarian at the gates, a vulgarian with no respect for history or art. But Trump, in a move that would become his signature, leaned into the criticism. He didn't apologize, he doubled down. He was a builder, not a curator. He was about the future, not the past. And when Trump Tower opened in 1983, it was a sensation. A 58-story vertical palace of pink marble, shimmering brass, and a 6-story waterfall cascading through the atrium. It was opulent, it was audacious, it was, to some, gloriously tacky. But it was undeniably his. He had literally carved his name into the sky above Fifth Avenue. The tower became his command center, his home, and the ultimate symbol of his arrival. He was no longer Fred Trump's son from Queens. He was Donald Trump of Manhattan, the master of the deal, the prince of the city. The 1980s were his golden age. He was a fixture in the gossip columns, a celebrity developer who was as famous for his lifestyle as for his buildings. He married Ivana Zelnikova, a glamorous Czech model, and together they became a New York power couple, the king and queen of the conspicuous consumption era. He wrote The Art of the Deal, a book that was part memoir, part business manifesto, and part masterclass in self-mythologizing. It became a colossal bestseller, cementing his image in the public consciousness not just as a rich guy, but as a business guru, a genius who could turn lead into gold. The book's central message, crafted with ghostwriter Tony Schwartz, was simple: think big, use leverage, and never, ever give up. It was the gospel of Trump, and millions of people bought it, read it, and believed it. He was on top of the world, buying up casinos in Atlantic City, launching his own airline, Trump Shuttle, and even purchasing a megayacht, the Trump Princess. He was no longer just building buildings, he was building a brand. The name Trump was a product, a seal of quality, luxury, and success. Or so it seemed. But the same relentless ambition that had fueled his rise was about to become his undoing. The killer instinct that his father had instilled in him had morphed into a gambler's addiction. He had taken on mountains of debt to finance his expansion, particularly in the notoriously fickle casino business of Atlantic City. He believed his own hype, that the Trump name itself was magic, that it could defy economic gravity. But gravity is a stubborn thing. By the early 1990s, the real estate market had cooled, and his empire, built on a foundation of leverage, began to crumble. The Trump Taj Mahal, his most extravagant casino, declared bankruptcy just a year after opening. It was a public and profound humiliation. The man who wrote the book on success was now facing catastrophic failure. His personal life imploded at the same time. His affair with a younger model, Marla Maples, became a tabloid firestorm, culminating in a messy and very public divorce from Ivana. The infamous headline "Best Sex I've Ever Had" screamed from the cover of the New York Post. The king was bleeding, and the media, which had once built him up, was now feasting on his downfall. He was billions of dollars in personal and business debt. The banks were circling. The man who had everything was on the verge of losing it all. For any other person, this would have been the end of the story. A spectacular rise followed by an even more spectacular fall. But Donald Trump was not any other person. He was Fred Trump's son, the boy who had been taught that the only thing that matters is to win. Losing was not an option. It was an existential threat to his very identity. And so, he fought. He negotiated with the banks, not from a position of strength, but with the audacious argument that he was worth more to them alive than dead. He convinced them that the Trump brand, though tarnished, was still their best asset. He gave up control of some properties, restructured his debt, and slowly, painstakingly, began the long, arduous climb back. It was a period of deep struggle, a time in the wilderness where he was no longer the toast of the town but a cautionary tale. He was humbled, but not broken. The experience seemed to forge a new kind of resilience in him, a deeper understanding of the brutal mechanics of survival. And it was in this period that he discovered a new, even more powerful medium for his brand, television. In 2004, he partnered with producer Mark Burnett to create a reality television show called The Apprentice. The concept was simple: a group of ambitious young contestants would compete in business-related tasks for the prize of a one-year, $250,000 job working for Donald Trump. The show was an instant, runaway hit. It was the perfect vehicle for his comeback. In the show's boardroom, he wasn't a struggling developer clawing his way back from bankruptcy, he was the ultimate arbiter of success and failure, the omnipotent tycoon sitting in judgment from a leather throne. He was a caricature of the man he had been in the 1980s, but this time, the image was even more powerful because it was beamed into the living rooms of millions of Americans every week. He had a new catchphrase, a two-word mantra of absolute power that would become a global phenomenon: "You're fired." With those two words, he wasn't just dismissing a contestant, he was reasserting his own dominance, erasing the memory of his own failures. He was no longer the one being judged by banks and creditors, he was the one doing the judging. The Apprentice ran for 14 seasons, resurrecting his career and reinventing his image for a new generation. He was no longer just a New York real estate mogul, he was a national celebrity, a symbol of straight-talking, no-nonsense success. The show taught him a crucial lesson: the perception of success is more powerful than success itself. The story you tell is more important than the facts on the balance sheet. This understanding would become the key to the next, most improbable chapter of his life. For years, he had flirted with the idea of running for president. It was a recurring theme, often dismissed as a publicity stunt to promote a new book or a new season of his show. He would dip his toe in, give fiery speeches, criticize the current leadership, and then retreat. But something was different in the 2010s. The country was polarized, anxious, and deeply distrustful of its institutions. There was a growing sense among a large segment of the population that the elites, the politicians, the media, the academics had failed them. They felt forgotten, looked down upon, and ignored. And Donald Trump, the man who had perfected the art of the brand, saw an opening. He saw a market. He began his political re-emergence by becoming the most prominent voice of the birther movement, a conspiracy theory that questioned whether President Barack Obama was a natural-born U.S. citizen. To his critics, it was a racist and baseless attack. But to his supporters, it was a brave challenge to the establishment. He was saying what they were thinking, unafraid of the backlash. He was tapping into a deep well of resentment and suspicion. Then, on June 16, 2015, he did what many thought he would never do. He rode down a golden escalator in the atrium of Trump Tower, the very monument he had built to his own success, and announced that he was running for President of the United States. The speech was classic Trump, rambling, boastful, and inflammatory. He called Mexican immigrants rapists, promised to build a great wall on the southern border, and declared that he would make America great again. The political establishment laughed. The media treated it as a joke, a summer spectacle that would soon fizzle out. They fundamentally misunderstood what was happening. They saw a clown, his followers saw a champion. They saw a reality TV star, his supporters saw a successful businessman who was finally telling the truth. He wasn't running a political campaign, he was launching the ultimate branding exercise. His rallies were not policy speeches, they were rock concerts, spectacles of shared identity where thousands of people gathered to be part of something, to feel seen, to vent their frustrations. He was a master of the media, dominating every news cycle with a new outrageous statement, a new nickname for an opponent, a new tweet. The media, in its attempt to cover the spectacle, gave him billions of dollars in free advertising. He defied every rule of modern politics. He insulted war heroes, feuded with a Gold Star family, and was caught on a hot mic bragging about sexually assaulting women. Each scandal, each controversy, was predicted to be the end of his campaign. And yet, with each one, his support among his base seemed to grow stronger. He was a fighter, their fighter, and every attack from the fake news media and the swamp in Washington only proved that he was on their side. He was the ultimate outsider, running against a system that his supporters believed was rigged against them. He bulldozed his way through a crowded field of experienced Republican governors and senators, defeating them one by one with a combination of brutal nicknames and a direct appeal to the party's base. The general election against Hillary Clinton, the embodiment of the political establishment, became a clash of two Americas. It was a brutal, ugly campaign that left the country more divided than ever. On election night, November 8, 2016, the world watched in stunned disbelief. The polls, the pundits, the experts, they had all been wrong. Donald John Trump, the boy from Queens who had conquered Manhattan, the tycoon who had faced bankruptcy, the reality TV star with a catchphrase, had been elected the 45th President of the United States. It was the ultimate deal, the ultimate victory, the ultimate validation. He had reached the pinnacle of global power, a peak even higher than the golden towers he had built. The presidency itself was as tumultuous and norm-shattering as his campaign. The Oval Office, for him, was not just a seat of power, it was the world's biggest stage, and he was its star. His presidency was a constant whirlwind of rallies, executive orders, and Twitter storms. He governed by instinct, trusting his gut over the advice of his advisors, creating a chaotic and often unstable environment within the White House. He saw the world in the same terms his father had taught him, as a zero-sum game of winners and losers. He pulled the United States out of international agreements like the Paris Climate Accord and the Iran nuclear deal, believing they were bad deals for America. He launched a trade war with China, imposing tariffs in an attempt to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. He reveled in the pomp and circumstance of the office, the military parades, the state dinners, the power to shape the world with a single signature. He successfully appointed 3 conservative justices to the Supreme Court, a legacy that will shape American jurisprudence for a generation. The economy, for much of his term, was strong, with low unemployment rates that he frequently touted as the greatest in history. But his presidency was also defined by constant conflict and investigation. From the very beginning, his administration was shadowed by the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election, a probe that consumed the nation's attention for 2 years and resulted in the indictment of several of his associates. He relentlessly attacked the investigation as a witch hunt, a deep state conspiracy to delegitimize his presidency. This constant state of war, this feeling of being under siege, seemed to fuel him. He thrived on conflict. His rallies became a way to recharge, to connect with his base, to be bathed in the adoration that he seemed to need like oxygen. He continued his war with the media, popularizing the term fake news to discredit any reporting that was critical of him. He was a president who communicated directly with the people through social media, bypassing the traditional gatekeepers of information. This created an intimate, powerful bond with his supporters, but also an environment where misinformation and conspiracy theories could flourish. The emotional toll of the presidency is immense for any occupant, but for Trump, it seemed to be a different kind of burden. He was a man who had spent his life curating his own environment, living in golden towers of his own design, surrounded by people who agreed with him. The White House, in some ways, became a gilded cage. He was the most powerful man in the world, yet he was constantly battling forces he could not fully control: the media, the courts, the bureaucracy, a global pandemic. The arrival of COVID-19 in 2020 was a crisis unlike any he had ever faced. It was an invisible enemy that could not be bullied, nicknamed, or bankrupted. His initial downplaying of the virus, his promotion of unproven treatments, and his clashes with his own public health experts were widely criticized and defined the final year of his presidency. The pandemic, coupled with widespread protests over racial injustice following the murder of George Floyd, created a perfect storm of national crisis. He ran for re-election in 2020 on his record, but also on a platform of law and order, casting himself as the only thing standing between his supporters and a descent into chaos. But the nation was weary. Weary of the virus, weary of the division, weary of the constant drama. He lost the election to Joe Biden. And for a man whose entire identity was built on the concept of winning, this loss was an impossibility, a reality he could not and would not accept. In the weeks and months that followed, he launched an unprecedented campaign to overturn the election results, claiming widespread fraud without providing credible evidence. His legal challenges were rejected by courts across the country, including by judges he had appointed. But he continued to insist that the election had been stolen from him. This narrative, repeated endlessly to his supporters, culminated on January 6, 2021. As Congress met to certify the election results, he held a rally in Washington, D.C., telling his followers to fight like hell. A mob of his supporters then marched to the Capitol and stormed the building, leading to a violent insurrection that left 5 people dead and shook the foundations of American democracy. He was impeached by the House of Representatives for a second time, a historical first, for inciting the insurrection. He left office under a dark cloud, banned from social media platforms and shunned by many in the political establishment. His present life is a continuation of his presidency, but from a different gilded cage, his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. It has become a kind of government in exile, a court where Republican hopefuls make pilgrimages to seek his blessing and where he continues to shape the future of the party he remade in his own image. He remains a powerful, perhaps the most powerful, force in Republican politics. His endorsements can make or break a candidate. His pronouncements still dominate the news. He is a man who thrives on being at the center of the story, and even out of office, he has managed to remain there. He is a former president, yet he lives with the constant shadow of ongoing legal challenges, from investigations into his business practices in New York to the probe into his handling of classified documents after leaving the White House. For anyone else, this would be a time of retreat and reflection. But for Donald Trump, it is simply another battle in the long war. The challenges do not seem to diminish him in the eyes of his followers, they reinforce his narrative of being a martyr, a victim of a vengeful deep state. The emotional impact of this unique post-presidency is hard to gauge. He projects an aura of unshakable confidence, of a man who is certain of his eventual vindication. But one can only imagine the private moments, the flicker of doubt, the deep-seated rage at a world that has refused to bend completely to his will. He is a man who once commanded the world's most powerful military and now battles subpoenas, a man who once lived in the White House and now holds court in a beach club. Fame, for him, was never a byproduct of success, it was the goal itself. And now, his fame is permanent, but its character has changed. He is no longer just a celebrity tycoon, he is a historical figure, a name that will be debated and analyzed for centuries. What does the future hold for Donald Trump? To predict his next move is a fool's errand, for his entire life has been a testament to his ability to defy expectations. He teases another run for the presidency in 2024, a potential comeback that would be the most extraordinary in American political history. Is it a genuine ambition or a way to stay relevant, to keep the spotlight he so desperately craves? Perhaps it is both. He is driven by a desire for vindication, a need to rewrite the ending of his story, to erase the stain of his 2020 loss. A second term would be the ultimate proof that he was right all along, that the people are still with him, that he is, and always has been, a winner. His legacy will be as complex and contradictory as the man himself. To his supporters, he will forever be the champion of the forgotten man, the businessman who drained the swamp, the president who put America first. He will be the builder, the patriot, the man who spoke truth to power. To his detractors, he will be a demagogue who threatened democracy, a con man who exploited division for personal gain, a president whose actions tarnished the office and diminished America's standing in the world. He is a Rorschach test for the nation, a figure onto whom people project their greatest hopes and their deepest fears. Perhaps the most enduring part of his legacy will be the way he transformed the relationship between politics, media, and truth. He demonstrated that in the modern age, a powerful narrative, repeated with enough conviction, can be more potent than objective fact. He showed that a celebrity brand could be a more effective political tool than a lifetime of public service. He pulled back the curtain on the raw, primal emotions that drive politics, the anger, the resentment, the desire for a strong leader who will fight for us against them. He built towers of glass and steel that reshaped a skyline, but he also shattered norms and institutions that had stood for generations. In the end, the story of Donald Trump may not be about politics or business at all. It may be the very simple, very human story of a boy from Queens who spent his entire life trying to prove something. Trying to prove to his demanding father, to the elites of Manhattan who scorned him, to the world, and perhaps most of all, to himself, that he was not just good enough, but the greatest. The boy who was taught to be a killer, who built a golden tower to touch the sky, who reached the highest office on earth, and who, even now, in the twilight of his epic, tumultuous life, seems to be fighting for one more win, one more round of applause, one more chance to hear the crowd roar his name. In the end, after all the rallies have faded and the tweets have been deleted, the story of a life is what remains. And what a story this has been. What are your thoughts on the journey of Donald Trump? What moment in his life do you find the most telling? Let us know in the comments below, because every perspective adds another layer to the tale. If our journey tonight moved you or made you think, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to Star's Tale for more stories behind the stars. Until next time, keep looking for the heart behind the headline.